tonight we are naming an award for a very special person. How would you describe what it was like being able to work with Jim?
You had to know Jim, you know, to understand a Jimmy story, because it's impossible to describe Jim.
You know, it really actually is hard to describe without it sounding unbelievable. That's how good he was.
Passionate and compassionate.
Well, number one, Jim was a brilliant guy.
Brilliant strategist.
Really a mentor as well as a manager.
Most moral person I ever met in my life. Well-read, smart, and he could write with more emotion than most people can feel.
Jim is the most endearing person I've ever met. Okay. I mean, if you met him, you loved him.
So Jim White was a character.
Okay.
He was like the guru of community development. He knew everything.
Knew how to say what needed to be done.
He also was a gifted guy as it related to development, because he was like one of the Hernandez Mafia members. Bobby helped get him into LISC.
One of my best friends, Jimmy, took me out to have a beer one night, and after about the 7th beer, he started talking about me running for city council, and I had no idea of what that was. And I said, well, what do we do next? He said, I'll meet you at the library downtown and we'll get a book on how to run a campaign. Seriously, and that's what we did. We didn't know what we were doing. Jimmy's ideas are always enormous, very, very moral. Everything had a moral basis to operate on. He just believed that, and he believed that society and city government and other governments didn't treat poor people right, and he wanted to rectify some of that. And Jimmy was the first one that could spot discrimination 10 miles off. Jimmy was always active, always doing something, and he thought LISC was a way to really assist the city as a whole.
He called it the Kansas City Building Blocks Program. The whole idea of the Building Blocks Program was to look at the social capital or the people who live there and engage them, and then the physical capital, what do they need on their block? And I got to read that before I interviewed, but he asked me, why in the would you want this job? I added my own comment to him because I already knew I could do it with him because he was such a soul. I said, the persons I have met that know you, when I asked them about you, they told me, he's a challenge. And I said, I'm up to the challenge. And he just slammed his hands down on the table and he goes, touche. I knew then that we had a relationship, that I was going to have support from him and our passions were going to match.
What can you tell me about Jim White? Like, what do you have any stories?
He wanted to get deals done, and he wanted to work with groups that were serious about getting deals done. He was in the business of talking people into backing him and his ideas, which he was almost always successful at. But it also meant he lived life on his own terms, and officed in his garage way before remote work was ever a thing. We wanted to keep on serving working poor families, and charitable institutions in Kansas City under the lead of Jan Kramer, who was then at the Community Foundation, said, we think we could raise a pot of money and you could get those rents even lower. So Jim was the architect of that. The CDCs, there were at least 7 or 8 CDCs that took part in what we called the Take Part Initiative.
If you think about that initiative, we raised tens of millions of dollars of 3 to 5 year commitments. And then he, for the first time, put a level of metrics around those numbers. He wanted to be able to tell a story, and he sold that thing with Frank Salazzoni to the community. And it was so exciting to be in the room and watch him do it.
Jim was very committed to the causes of social justice and inequities. And Jim was always frustrated knowing that more could be done. at all levels. No one to blame. It was just so complicated to change the world.
There isn't a leader during my time in the community that I was prouder to have learned from, to have worked with, and to have been associated with.